Okay, so for this term's reflection, I decided to focus on climate change in Poland and specifically most of the areas that are more widely impacted and some of the ways that Poland is trying to prevent these issues from getting worse. Somehow, some ways that they're trying to reverse it, but mainly just the ways that they're focusing on preventing it in the future. And that's on a national level, but then also an international level as well. So, firstly, the areas that are most affected are obviously the areas that are rich in nature, rich in diverse or biodiversity, rich in ecosystems and all of that. So the first thing that is really majorly affected by climate change is the Bialowieza forest. And this forest is being affected by the rising temperatures and changing precipitation patterns. The Carpathian Mountains are also being affected by climate change a lot, mainly by wildfires, but also by the rising temperatures, and the changing precipitation patterns are also affecting the biodiversity and the ecosystems and the life that is seen on these mountains. And central Poland is a very big farming area. This is where most of the farming in Poland is done. And so the droughts and heat waves are obviously affecting the farmlands a lot, as well as the rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns. It's all affecting the farmland, but mainly the droughts are being a really big deal right now in Poland, especially on that farmland. And there are many rivers in Poland, the main river being the Vistula, and the rivers are experiencing reduced water levels, which is impacting the ecosystems, impacting water supplies, impacting that biodiversity, and just making it a really overall not great, because water is very important for farming, for sustainability of life, and everything like that. So, what's Poland doing to try to stop these issues from getting worse? So, one of the major things that Poland takes a lot of pride in right now is the way that they are changing their energy systems. So, Poland is historically a very coal dependent country. They are working right now on switching from their coal dependency, where they get their coal imported from like Russia and Norway. They're working on switching that towards solar and wind power. But of course, that's very expensive. So it's a slow process, but it is something that they're working on, have been working on for years, and hope to really increase that solar and wind power usage in the future. Electromobility is another way that they are working to fight these climate change effects. And so they're investing in infrastructure for electric vehicles. There's a huge surplus of electric vehicle charging stations that have been put out. And they're also encouraging people to get electric vehicles as well. It's heavily encouraged. And all of this infrastructure is just making it a lot easier for electric vehicles to be put out in the streets, actually. Afforestation is another way that Poland is really trying to fight to combat the climate change. So they're doing large-scale plantings of trees, and they're working on many restoration projects, such as like with the Bialowieza forest, they're working on planting more trees and trying to restore that biodiversity, that wildlife, those ecosystems that have been lost. So, internationally, there are a lot of initiatives that Poland is a part of that they are using to focus on their own country, but also like the EU, for example, Europe in general, and all over the world. They're trying their best to try to fight this climate change, the climate change that they're experiencing. So there are many EU climate goals that they are trying to reach, specifically the net zero by 2050, which is the net zero emissions by 2050. And they're working on, like I said, that change in transportation. They're shifting in energy supplies, and they're trying to make the agriculture better by farming more sustainably, working on water preservation and clean soil and all of that. They are also very into the Paris Agreement, and COP24 is actually, they hosted COP24 in 2018, where they basically just reinforced their vow to follow the Paris Agreement, and they're very big supporters of the Paris Agreement, and they have been working towards those goals by having those changes in transportation and energy and agriculture. There's also the EU Green Deal, which is one of the EU climate goals, pretty similar to the net zero by 2050, but it's their goal to become climate neutral by 2050. They've been working with the EU to get cleaner energy and reduce the emissions that they are emitting. But all of this is really expensive and kind of hard to carry out on a large scale form as it is for a whole country to be able to do all of this. So they're working hard, but it is expensive, and it's not going to be something that happens super fast. The past few years have actually been shown a lot of growth within like their cleaner energy, their electromobility, reducing their emissions, but it's going to be a long process to actually be able to limit all of that stuff and get everyone on board, which is next to impossible. But that's ways that they have been mitigating and dealing with and trying to prevent the climate change. But how are they actually adapting to the problems that have already surfaced? So, as I said earlier, the water levels are really low and there's a low supply of water. So, they're working really hard on water management. So, with the low supply of water, obviously means that they are trying to save water where possible. They're encouraging all citizens to save water whenever it's possible. And the government is creating flood protections to save water, irrigation systems, and all types of water saving systems in order to save the water and not create a huge water waste. They're also working to change to more sustainable farming practices, especially in the central Poland area where all of that farming is occurring. There are all of the droughts and heat waves that are affecting the plants and crops. So they have been trying to get farmers to switch to drought-resistant crop varieties that won't be as affected by periods of droughts. And then they're obviously trying to protect the soil and get richer soil with nutrients that are going to help the plants grow, but also cleaner soil. And the government is offering stipends to farmers who are farming sustainably and trying to go a little bit greener with their practices. And then obviously there is a lot of biodiversity protection that is happening. They have created national parks and nature reserves, and there have been a lot of wetland and forest restoration efforts. So obviously climate change is not going to be fixed in overnight or even in the next few years, but Poland has been working really hard to actually try to reverse some of the damage that climate change has done by, working on the biodiversity protection things, wetland and forest restoration, cutting the energy levels, going greener. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to be a very, very, very long process, but Poland is doing really, really well at this, and they are something that other countries should be looking up to right now because they're killing it with their goals, and not even just their goals, but with the practices that they're actually following through with. So yeah, that is a little bit of a short story on climate change in Poland right now.